Welcome to the eCampus eCast. This week we're talking to Dr. Myra Beth Bundy, who is an instructor in the psychology department here at EKU. Dr. Bundy, thanks so much for being with us today, taking time to talk about the program and what you do at EKU.
I'm happy to be here.
So, Dr. Bundy, if you will, tell our audience a little bit about why you chose psychology as a field of study and how choosing psychology as a field of study eventually led you to EKU to become an instructor.
Well, I grew up in Kentucky, in southeastern Kentucky. So this is a great question. So I've always been a voracious reader. I don't know when I learned to read, early. And so by second grade, I was begging my mother to buy me a new Nancy Drew book every week, and reading them reading them and over again. I would run out of books every week. So I thought about being a literature major when I went to college, but then I started thinking about what I liked about literature, and I really didn't like the writing part of that study as much as just the thinking about the characters. And then I realized I could think about real people in the same way. And, to me, a lot of psychology is the same thing as reading a book. I'm learning about this person. I'm thinking about what caused them to be the way they are and, thinking about their motivations. Anyway, I got into psychology to do my reading in real life. And I thought I could be more helpful doing it in real life than just reading about it. Although my main hobby is reading, and I still read all the time. So I grew up in Kentucky, and I went other places for graduate school, and I lived in 3 other states for years. And then I just saw this EKU job, and I thought, I'll try it for a little while. Why not? I could be closer to family. And I think that was 25 years ago. So I tried it, I liked it, and I stayed.
That's great. Well, so where in southeastern Kentucky are you from? Can I ask?
Yeah, Laurel County.
Oh, yeah.
And my family has roots in Clay County as well.
That's so great. I think so many people who work at EKU or have affiliation with EKU are from the region. I know that being a regional university, its role in the development of Eastern Kentucky is just so critical. And so with that in mind, a regional university depends a lot on students who are in the region coming there for college. What would you say after 25 years and being a native of Eastern Kentucky, what would you say to a high school student who might be considering EKU as an option for higher ed, but might be kind of waffling on that? What would you say to them?
Oh, I guess I would say that you can have the benefit of a big university with new ideas combined with small town service, small classes, and personal relationships with your instructors. So don't go far away. Stay in Kentucky. Come to a regional university.
That's great. That's great. I'm a graduate of a regional university, so I'm a big fan. In the 25 years that you've been at EKU, you have experience teaching in a variety of different settings. You've done face-to-face. You're certainly very experienced in our online program with eCampus, with our online programs with eCampus. You've taught hybrid, et cetera. Talk a little bit about what you consider to be the strengths and weaknesses of each of these delivery models, and talk, if you can, kind of touch on what it might mean as an instructor, some of the strengths and weaknesses as an instructor, and also some of the pros and cons for students, in your opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the person, what the instructor's preferences and skills are and what the student's preferences and skills are. So that's something I like about EKU. You can choose, and right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, so it's a little bit of a different time, but under typical circumstances, you can choose how much you want to be face-to-face versus in between versus all online. And I love people having the choice, both instructors and students. Seems like over the years, I've been getting more and more online. I started online teaching when my second son was born, so I can tell you exactly when I started it. So about 17 years ago. So I taught all face-to-face before that, and I guess over those 17 years, I've been moving more and more toward online. I like the idea of I put what I have to teach out there. I set it all up. And then I love the idea that students can come and pick that up whenever it suits them. It's there waiting for them, you know, like a little surprise. And then they can decide when they want to do it, how they want to do it. I still do a lot of personal stuff, though. We're going to talk about our ABA courses. I do a weekly live review, kind of like what you and I are doing right now. I do this with all my students in those classes every Wednesday night. We're together reviewing and kind of quizzing ourselves. So I try to combine that online. It's waiting for you, and here you can see me in person if you want to. You know, you can see me live if you want to. And then if somebody can't do that, they can watch a video recording. So again, it's student choice. Maybe a student says, I get nervous. In fact, I had this happen. I get nervous when she calls on me and I can't think and I don't learn well that way. So I said, don't come then. Just watch it recording. I mean, I'll try to remember not to call on you, but you know I won't call on you. If it's a recording, I can't.
Right.
I can't reach out and get you that way. So try it that way. I just like all the different options that people have. Let's say an hour, let's say you're like me and an hour is too long for you to sit still. Face to face, you don't have a lot of choice, but online or hybrid, you can choose. Maybe you watch that hour piece of instruction over the course of 2 days, you know, or something like that. I do a lot of clinical teaching, and that's probably my biggest skill is clinical practice and applied behavior analysis and psychology. I like to do those things in person. I like to be, you know, in sitting with my student and with the client. But since the pandemic, we've been doing that stuff via Zoom healthcare, and we've still all been there together. So even that kind of teaching, I've found out I can do online pretty well.
That's wonderful. You know, you brought up a really good point about student participation being a little different in an online course, and that being one example that you shared was it being a pro for students who might be more introverted in class, right? Mm-hmm. So, and they are not quite as apt to speak out or ask a question, but in an online environment, you know, they are comfortable posting a question to a discussion forum or in a chat. Or you use an external discussion forum in your courses that you like, and you find probably that some of those students who may not necessarily participate as vigorously in class might be more willing to participate in an online environment. So that's one pro. I appreciate your mentioning that, and also thanks for mentioning the availability, right? So that people can come and participate as they have time and in their own way. Those are really strong points, I think. But on that topic, you know, of online learning or remote teaching, which a lot of people have had to move to, a lot of instructors have had to move to that, and they had no choice, right? We just had to do it, right? Yeah. In addition to, you mentioned the weekly check-ins, which I think it'd be great to hear a little bit more about that, and at any point during this. But is that one tip that you would offer, or one suggestion you would offer to colleagues who are moving to remote instruction for the first time, who may not have experience in online instruction? One of them would be a weekly check-in. And are there other strategies that you would suggest to sort of new to remote teaching instructors that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I wrote a little list because I wanted to remember to share them. Okay, so my first suggestion is personalization, so that whatever you do, in online, it's especially easy to have each student personalize what they do with the assignment, just because you're going to be grading everything individually. So give them some options. Take this concept, use it, you know, these are your choices. So personalization. My second thing is be responsive to students online, sort of managing multiple roles, figure out what you do well and do a lot of that, and then maybe reach out to get help from somebody else for what you don't do well. This morning, I was seeing a client through Zoom Healthcare, and he couldn't get his Zoom to work.
Oh gosh.
And so, you know, I could spend forever trying to figure that out, but I know I'm not good at it. So I said, hold on, I know somebody who's good at this. Let's call them up and get them to help us. So the same thing as an online instructor, don't just struggle with it for yourself for hours, reach out and get help. We have tech support for helping students with tech support. So don't be afraid, especially for people that are doing this as a new instructor, they need to get help from other people. The other thing is that I know Dr. Winslow did one of these podcasts. I don't know what he said about this, but he and I have kind of different philosophies. And I think it's kind of cool to see how I think both of us are pretty popular online instructors. So maybe our different ways work. He likes to try a lot of everything, lots of new apps. Try this, try that. He's always finding something new and trying to do it. And I tend to be very plotting and methodical. Each week is going to be the same. We're going to have this set of things. You know, you're going to have 4 things to do each week, and it's going to repeat. We're going to have one novel thing. It's going to be your big project. And we're going to have a series of small assignments to work up to it till the very end. And then we're going to have our big free-for-all and do this big project. So I'm repetitive. I don't, you know, if I have some cool new app or something I want to try, I might do that for one assignment. I don't mix things up every week because I think it stresses students out. Some students.
Well, those are great tips. Those are great tips. And yeah, that's another good point I think that you introduce. The idea that you do have a lot of flexibility with those different delivery models, and you can decide what works best for you and your teaching style.
That's right.
And for your students. Those are great points. I love what you said at the beginning about, you know, your love of reading and your love of kind of, you know, seeing people as stories. Looking at the recent, you know, we've all been dealing with a lot of stress over the last 4 months, you know, sort of stress that we're not used to, that we're not accustomed to. Our lives have been disrupted by the pandemic, and then there's a lot of other unrest. As a psychological professional, and also teaching professional, but also practicing psychologist, what advice or tips or strategies would you offer to your students, or if they ask, what are sort of some standard ways that you might suggest they help take care of themselves during this time to sort of, you know, self-care, some sort of self-care tips? What would you suggest?
So I'll tell you what, as a psychologist, a lot of times, and a behavior analyst too, I'll turn to my professional sort of main page or main voice to see what they have. And in this case, APA, the American Psychological Association, has this COVID-19 resource page, super helpful. You could just search for APA COVID and it's there. And what I liked about that is there's a whole list of resources. You can find your specific concern and go in there, and they have good advice and often research-based advice on there. So let's say you had a loved one die of COVID, or you just had a loved one die during the time of COVID, or you're a parent and your kids are at home, or you've lost your job, or you've changed and you're now working at home. So you can go through APA's resources and kind of pick which thing is most applicable to you. I really like that and I encourage people to take advantage of that. It's free. But I went, for the purposes of today's talk, I went and just looked for a general stress and coping resource.
Yeah.
I found something. It's by Dr. Lynn Bufka. He's a psychologist, obviously. So I pulled out 5 highlights from her advice. And so here they are. The first one is to make sure to do things to connect socially. This is particularly if you're working at home, working from home. Do things to connect socially, even if it's online versus face-to-face. So, you know, some of these, I've got a friend who is French. I did a socially distanced kayaking with him this weekend. And he says that he gets together on Friday evenings for a virtual happy hour with his friends from France.
What a great idea.
There's a time difference, so he has to do it early in the afternoon. I don't know how that works for the rest of his day. It's evening in France, you know, and it's afternoon here. But they've been getting together once a week. So, you know, whoever is interested gets together. So something like that, some kind of virtual social life. Normally, I think he'd probably be in France for the summer. He didn't get to do that, so he's doing it virtually. So the second thing is to give yourself a little grace. Give the people you live with a little grace. Give the people you work with a little grace. People that might not be their best selves right now. So try to be, including yourself, so try to be patient. Her next thing is, I thought was a really good one, figure out routines for your new normal. Your old routines may be shaken up. I mean, even just things like how do you get your groceries? Where do you go for recreation? You know, what are your most anticipated activities? figure out a way to have all those important things in your life, and what is your new routine going to be, and kind of change with it. I know for a while my family we were ordering our groceries, and then we were letting them sit on the porch and kind of de-germ, and then we had piles of stuff on our porch. It was like, no. So then we decided it was low risk and a lot easier to go pick up, and cheaper to pick up our things, you know. So it was sort of changing up how you do things and coming up with a new routine that feels safe to you. If you're working at home, she had some specific advice, which I have not been following. And I know you haven't either, Esther, which is, even if you're working at home, you're supposed to do your regular hours. You know, you shouldn't be working at midnight just because you can, because you're at home.
Right.
But I'm always working at midnight, regardless of the pandemic. So I feel free to just work. I might take an hour off and walk in the middle of the day, and then I'm going to make it up with 2 hours, you know, at 1 a.m. But this is one of the great things about being a professor. You have that kind of flexibility to work like that all the time. I guess if you're a person that traditionally has worked 9 to 5, this psychologist's suggestion is you probably should try to keep to that. And especially don't let yourself start bleeding over so that you're working longer and longer hours just because you're not leaving your office, kind of thing.
Right.
She also encouraged separating out home and workspace. So even if you've just got, I mean, I certainly don't have an office room in my house, but I do have this couch that I'm sitting on right now. And then I put my laptop on a little stool in front of my couch, and that's my workspace. And even my children know if they come in and they see me here, they'll close the door back and go back out. They know I'm working. And let's see, 2 more things. She says, acknowledge your feelings about living in the midst of a global pandemic. Don't try to crush them down and just keep going, but say, hey, I'm stressed out, or I'm upset. And then the last thing is exercise. You know, exercise is one of the best free things you can do for your mental health. Now, some countries, I have a friend who lives in Madrid, and she was prohibited from leaving her apartment for weeks and weeks.
Oh, goodness.
So she had exercise in her home. She was doing workout videos, she told me, streaming them. But, you know, so far we've been able to go outside and walk and get some exercise. So this psychologist says, find your way to get some kind of moving around time and do it. Because especially for people that are driving less and, you know, sort of walking we may be sitting in one place more than usual. And she wants us to get out and walk or move or run, whatever.
I know that was for us in this house, being able to get out, especially in those early months. We had a lovely April. April was just beautiful. And so that was really helpful here. And those, and you mentioned the site at the beginning. Is it apa.org? Is that where they would go?
Yeah, I mean, I just searched APA and COVID.
APA and COVID. Okay.
That's a wonderful list of resources.
It is so important to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, because even though, and that's a great point, I think, about separating spaces, so that you at least feel like there's some delineation between your work life and your home life. I'm trying to get better at that. I'm not really great at that. I'm trying to improve.
Yeah, I'm not ever great at that, though. That isn't, you know, that's the same as normal. It's not the new pandemic. I think my lifestyle, my work style that I've been doing all my life is very similar to pandemic. I've always worked a lot from home. I've always worked a lot at night. I have a lot of children, and I've always done my deepest thinking when they're sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can still do that.
Right.
I think it's harder on people that have made a more radical change in how they work.
Well, that is a good point, because it has impacted some people much differently than others, especially if you're someone who has never worked from home before, you know.
Exactly.
Whereas, you know, in other fields, it's a little more common to take a day or two that you work from home. And then that's a great point. And those are great tips. Thanks so much for sharing those. So shifting gears just a little bit, in addition to, you know, your role in the psychology faculty at EKU, teaching undergraduate and graduate courses, you're also the program coordinator for the Applied Behavior Analysis program. It's a master's program that's offered online through eCampus. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and how the EKU program prepares students for the national certification?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So The psychology department we have a PsyD program, a doctoral program in clinical psychology, and we have a general master's program. So we've had that general master's program for years, but the coordinator of that program was nice enough to allow us to add a concentration. And so the concentration is in applied behavior analysis. And there are a couple ways you can go with that. Students can get a master's degree in general psychology with a concentration in applied behavior analysis. So this is somebody who's needing a master's degree and needing applied behavior analysis classes and hoping to use that educational component to sit for the board certified behavior analysis, board certified behavior analyst certification. So we have what's called a verified course sequence, which is, it's a ABA courses that are approved by Applied Behavior Analysis International to meet the educational requirements to sit for this BCBA, to become a certified applied behavior analyst. So we have the master's degree, so you can get your master's degree and that VCS in ABA. But also, if you're a person that already has a master's degree, you can come in and just take the VCS. So you're sort of re-specializing in ABA and getting yourself set to have those educational requirements to sit for that exam. So we've just started that this year in 2020, and we've had some amazing students, had a lot of fun creating. You and I have worked together to create these classes, a lot of the classes, and now we've been enrolling them and teaching them and really loving it.
It is a great program. I just cannot say enough good things about the faculty for that program at EKU. You and the other ABA faculty are just wonderful. So if someone's listening to this and they say, oh, an ABA master's, that sounds really interesting, and I've heard about the certification. Is it just for students who are psychology undergrads, who have an undergrad in psychology, or would the master's apply to other fields of study?
Good question. You've got to have a little bit of background in psychology, especially for the master's degree. Those details are on the website. You have to have had intro to, it doesn't make sense to go for a master if you haven't had an intro class in psychology. But we look at related fields too. And in fact, so right now, to sit for the BCBA exam, you have to have a master's degree in just a small set of fields. It's applied behavior analysis, education, psychology. However, starting in 2022, anybody with a master's degree in literally any topic, as long as they have a verified course sequence or as long as they have some ABA required courses, they can sit the BCBA exam. So ABA is really opening up to anybody that has a master's degree in any field starting in 2022 and has this set of ABA courses plus some supervised experience, they can sit for the exam. So rather than closing down, the field of ABA is opening up to a wider array of fields and backgrounds.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for that clarification. So you're a certified BCBA, right?
Yeah, BCBA. Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about why you feel that field of study is important, and then maybe, well, right now just talk about why is that important in your experience? Why did you choose to pursue that certification, and why do you feel that area of study is so relevant?
It's a great question because I think ABA is sometimes misunderstood. For one thing, ABA is much more than just discrete trial tabletop teaching. It's a huge field with wide application. It can be applied to sports, to the workplace, to business, to employees. It can be certainly applied to education. It can be applied to people with severe mental illness. It can be applied to politics, to just everything in life. Because what ABA really is, in its broadest and most pure sense, is using B.F. Skinner's discoveries and principles of behavior to understand behavior at a very deep level. So if you've ever wondered, why did he do that? An applied behavior analyst has your answer. Why can't I stop? All those questions about human behavior. You sit and watch the news and you're thinking, why? Well, applied behavior analysis behavior analytic analysis can answer those questions. And they really answer those questions in terms of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So behavior analysis is really less about changing an individual person's behavior. It's more about changing environmental context. So if we're working with a business, it's not about we're going to make your employees do what you want them to do. It's much more about you need to change your business practices and set up the reinforcements in your environment to increase the kind of behaviors you want to see your employees do more often. So at its purest, ABA is about changing the environment to help people meet their outcomes.
That's a great summary quote. That's great. So a typical day in the life of a BCBA might involve consulting with a business about the climate of their work. I'm sorry, about their climate in their agency or their department.
Yeah, if you're in organizational behavior management. So within ABA, there are all kinds of subspecialties. So
great, yeah.
It depends on your thing. It depends on, so you take our classes or, another set of another verified course sequence, and you learn all the fundamentals of deep analysis of human behavior. And even there are animal applications too, animal training and that kind of thing. So you learn that those deep core concepts, and then you get your experience in the setting that's interesting to you and that you care about. And then you can apply those principles to that setting that you know about, that you're expert in. So for you, I don't know, what's your setting of expertise?
Well, instructional design, designing courses or training, corporate training or business training.
So yeah, you would use applied behavior analysis to figure out the best way to design your courses, the best, what behaviors do we want to see more of in my instructors or in my students, and how can I build in reinforcers so that I increase those behaviors.
And how does the environment that they'll be practicing these behaviors in or these skills in factor into how they might understand them, something like that, sort of a holistic approach. That's really
what do I want to see? What do they want to see? What are their goals? I mean, right, we're in education, we're really big into folks setting goals for themselves. Well, that's the core of ABA. What outcomes do you want in your life? Big outcomes. Like it might be things like I want to get my bachelor's degree, or I hope to someday become a board certified behavior analyst and help people. So those are the broad outcomes. And then we can look at some smaller target goals to get the person to that place. And in order to do that, we're all working all the time. We're behaving because of reinforcements and punishments in our environment. So applied behavior analysts can help set those up so that we get the behavior that the person needs in order to reach the outcomes that they've set for themselves.
That's great. Thanks, Myra Beth. In your opinion, sort of continuing on the conversation about the ABA program at eCampus, in your opinion, as the program coordinator, as someone who's helped develop the curriculum, who's kind of designed the program and worked individually with all the instructors, what are some of the signature components of this program that you think make it a bit unique to other programs who offer similar preparation for the national certification?
A lot of the things, of course, are I had those top 5 things I like to do in online teaching. So hopefully those things are present in the course. I think we're growing, but we're still fairly small. So personalization is a big thing. So I have a welcome phone call with everybody that comes into the program. So I ask them about themselves. I'm pretty good at remembering who people are. I have them all in the intro class coming in so that I get to know who they are. We have program advisors who know each student very well. So if somebody's having a problem or they have a request or something they want to talk about or a specific application that they're setting their goal in for ABA, we have the personal kinds of services available to help people do that. So to me, and to our program in general, every single student matters. So I think to some bigger programs, here's the program, it's set, good luck. But for us, we're able to be a little more flexible, and I think we're a little more personally invested in every single student. And instructional designers like you, I think, have taken all my boring lectures and put them in a product so that I think students actually enjoy, I think they actually look forward to the content of the class. I've had several students tell me that it was, easy to digest. Every week they look for, and I'm goofy and silly. I have those stories of the week that I do, and students like every week I look forward to seeing what it's going to be this week. So we try to make learning fun.
That is a great, well, thank you. You're gracious. Thank you. As someone who's worked with the ABA program, you in particular, and other instructors in the program and at EKU, I'm always impressed by the commitment to student success that I see in the instructors at EKU. And I think that's a great point you make about the personal investment that you feel in the students who enroll in the ABA program, and also the students who are in the psychology program. I see that on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for that commitment to the students. And on the subject of the students, if I'm listening to this podcast and I think, well, this sounds great, this sounds like something that I might be interested in, what are the next steps? How do I go about finding out more about the program and seeing what I need to secure to get enrolled?
It's very easy. You would just search, if you just search EKU ABA, it's all going to pop up there. There's a little box that you can put your information in, and then if you do that, we'll contact you. You can also look for me, look for Dr. Bundy, email me, and I have people email me all the time asking about it, telling me about themselves, and asking whether I think it would be a good fit or not. Of course, I'm a big advocate of our psychology program and our ABA program. But every now and then, I actually just had a phone call with somebody last week, and I was like, you're already started on something. I think you should finish what you're in the middle of it. I don't think it makes sense to switch. So I'll be honest, solicit my opinion. I'll be honest.
That is a great quality that I really appreciate about you. Are there any things about the program? Is there anything about the program that you'd like to talk about that maybe we haven't discussed at this point?
Yeah, there was a question you sent me a list of questions, and there was one that you sent me that I don't think we talked about, and I thought it was such a good question. How did you phrase it? I think maybe you said, what would my advice be to somebody who maybe was in high school and thought they may want a career in psychology or ABA? And my advice is twofold. Number one, ABA is pretty career oriented. You know what I mean? It's certification oriented at the master's level. So ABA, you can actually, you can become a registered behavior technician at the high school level. You can become a board certified assistant behavior analyst at the undergraduate level. And then you have to have a master's degree to be a BCB. So with ABA, there are sort of career tracks at each level of education from high school forward. So that's kind of cool. It's very career-focused field. With psychology, it's a little less like that. So with psychology, if you're going to study psychology, you have to learn about the different careers that are related. You have to learn about what you can do with your degree at the bachelor's level and at the graduate level. So that's one piece of advice. Just do some investigation about how you can use the degree. But my second big piece of advice for people interested in ABA or psychology is, as a young person, any experience you get with people will be relevant to your studies of ABA or psychology as you go on. And my specific example, which I was excited to be able to share, is I loved babysitting, and I babysat from the time I was 11 years old. This was a long time ago, guys. Probably, I don't know if 11-year-olds can babysit now, but way back when, in the 1970s, 11-year-olds could babysit. And I babysat starting then, and I really babysat all the way through my 20s. I always made extra money by babysitting. And, you know, I'm a clinical psychologist and an applied behavior analyst, and I work with people of all ages, but particularly I specialize in psychology. I mean, in children in my psychology part of my practice. And I think probably, I certainly learned a lot in my classes, but the foundation for everything I do to this day was all the children I was able to work with and really get to know well during babysitting. So any kind of people work that you do as a high school student throughout your life will impact your personal development, your career development as a psychologist or as a applied behavior analyst. That's my advice.
That's great advice, and again, it ties into your into the reason that you pursued this in the first place, and that, you know, looking to explore the stories of the people that you meet and the people that you work with and the people that you come in contact with every day. And you're right, that is such a good point, that skill set, the idea of being able to, the skill set of being able to see the stories and analyze the stories that are people, is crucial to success in a lot of different fields,
Absolutely.
and certainly in psychology. So Myra Beth, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. And this podcast will be available at the eCampus eCast website on idc.eku. You can find it in the left menu link. And so Myra Beth, thanks so much for contacting us today. And if anyone's interested in learning more about the ABA program, just go to eku.edu and search for ABA, or do a search for Dr. Myra Beth Bundy. You can email her directly, and the ABA search will bring up our page at ekuonline.edu. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.